What's up, everybody? Welcome to another episode of Game School Online, where we talk to game development professionals, bring them on the show, and have them break down their techniques on their personal projects or whatever they want to share to take you from piss poor to amazing, wherever you are. So I am your host, Brandon Pham, and I'm bringing on a special guest today. And he's a dear colleague and friend for a while now, Scott Knapp. How you doing, Scott?
And how's it going?
Good, Scott. So for people who don't know you offhand, but you've been on the show a few times by now, can you give them a quick reminder how awesome you are, where you're from, and where you're heading?
I don't know about awesome, dude. I'm all right, I guess. But yeah, so I'm a lighting artist at Turtle Rock Studios right now. So work in video games. I've worked in feature film in the past as well. But yeah, so kind of bounce back and forth between games and film.
Awesome. So the one question that I like to kind of ask pretty much for the last couple of weeks, it's no surprise, right? Everyone's pretty much quarantined at this time. How are you guys dealing with it? How are people within your network dealing with it? Some studios are kind of prepared for this to kind of suddenly go remote working. Some aren't. Kind of want to know your thoughts about that for those game developers out there kind of seeking, what the network is looking like right now.
Yeah, I mean, Turtle Rock, we've got work for home for people who've been there for a while. But it's like super, like if you absolutely need it. It's not like a every week thing, and it's definitely not something that most people do. It's kind of like if you want to sneak in some overtime hours, or if you're not feeling too well, but you can still work from home. That's been the case for most of the time there. But since the COVID-19 thing broke out, we went full remote. So the whole studio had to get ramped up in like 2 or 3 days. So IT and like all of our programmers and stuff, and the producers, everybody's trying to get everybody organized and get anything people needed. Like there's people that we work with that like didn't even have like personal computers that could run Unreal Engine and stuff. So they had to like build personal kits for people to take home in some cases, and then make sure everybody's hard drives and stuff were clear and good enough to run like all of our stuff. So they had to get all that stuff ramped up like super fast, dude. It was crazy. And then not only that, we had to stagger when people would come pick things up because of the social distancing thing. So yeah.
So ITs are pretty much on the front lines like doctors right now, touching everybody's stuff.
Yeah, exactly, dude. For sure, man.
Yeah, it's one of those crazier thoughts. So it took you guys a couple weeks. Is everyone pretty much set up right now? Did you guys have enough rigs to kind of hand out to everyone, or do you guys have to order stuff, like you said, just to supply people with things?
Most people were able to get set up at home. We're a studio full of nerdos, so most nerdos have good like computers at the house,
Yeah.
So most people, it was just a matter of like VPNing in, which is like a lot easier to set up. But there was like a few cases where people like only had Mac or something like that, and didn't have like a Windows partition. So in those cases, I don't even know what the percentage is. Maybe like 2 or 3% of the studio needed rigs or something. But yeah, not too bad, not too painful.
Right. I mean, just talking to your friends, I know you've been in the industry for a while. You probably have a lot that you're speaking to, especially in this time where we're like talking to more people usual. That's the funny thing, right? During work hours, we're talking to more people now because of the social distancing stuff. What are the situations? You don't have to name any studios. How are they faring? Are they doing just as well or worse?
I've been really surprised, man. Like I said, like I worked in visual effects in the past and stuff. I worked at like Frame Store and Moving Picture Company and Double Negative, not Double Negative, Frame Store, and Digital Domain. And like I've been following them on social media a little bit and seeing how they've been handling it, because a lot of their stuff is like a lot more. It's all client based. So like having clients trusting employees to work on their stuff from home is like something that's never been a thing. So it's pretty cool seeing like how, as these different industries are handling it, there's been like a lot more trust in the artists and people doing stuff and like being trusted to do the right thing at home. And hopefully this will kind of set a precedent for the future, right? Like it'd be sick if a lot of these industries, you can start moving towards that, right? Everything's super collaborative and communication's gotten a lot better with things like Discord and Slack and stuff. So I think they're like, oh, this might be manageable where people can, maybe work from home like once or twice a week moving forward or something,
Mm-hmm.
So it's been pretty cool.
So how do you think realistically? Because I've been kind of like talking to a lot of people too, and a lot of studios are kind of like in the same situation. They're kind of scrambling for equipment, getting people set up. There are a lot of nerdos at the studios that are already well equipped to kind of handle this kind of situation. But in a lot of other situations, right, they don't do a lot of personal work at home. They just go in and clock in and clock out for their full-time job, so they don't really have that setup. And then you throw in the whole X factor with our kids. Suddenly, our teachers are pretty much piecing out for the rest of the year. Mm-hmm. And now we have these kids kind of distracting during the work hours. So deadlines, of course, are not going to be as met at the very beginning stages and stuff. I kind of want to see like what your grasp of, I think Turtle Rock is probably a lot more relaxed in this kind of state, but studios that are more kind of set with their own old ways, right, probably will try to prefer business as usual as fast as possible. I do hope there is some kind of residual from this where people are like, this actually works. We've been doing it for 3-4 months, but it could be one of those things where like, it has to be after 4 months where they finally, yeah.
Right.
I mean, what do you think? Do you think realistically a good percentage of studios will finally let people just work 1 day a week or be more open to this type of thing?
Yeah, I mean, I doubt it'll be most, but I think some will. And that might be like a new perk, people like got the 401k and the health benefits, like working from home could be a perk that you start seeing companies list on their websites and stuff, right? I do think the productivity thing varies from person to person. Like in my case, I definitely do, have the kids, like they're like back there right now playing with my wife, doing puzzles and stuff. At any moment they could bust through the door.
Yep.
So that happens during work time sometimes too. But overall, I feel like my productivity has gone up a little bit even because I have, not to worry about like, people coming to my desk or like as many meetings and stuff like that. A lot of that stuff's kind of toned down. So I feel like I'm putting almost more work in and doing a little bit more hours because I can just do them in my PJs,
Exactly.
But I do know the collaborative aspect that comes with working at a studio. I think that has taken a hit. People are less inclined to just like write on chat as much as they would. And like stuff is less free flowing on chat as it would be if you're just talking to someone in person. Like if I came over to your desk and was like, hey dude, like can we look at these UVs together? I'm a lot more inclined to do that face to face than like start a screen share thing with you and like bother you. I'd probably just dig it open myself, And I think some of the collaborative aspects have kind of taken a hit, which, is important for games for sure. So I think pros and cons.
Definitely. Well, I'm actually very curious, and I'm hopeful, as you are, that more studios are going to be okay with this. I think it's one of those things that we're going to have to wait till the battle scene kind of settles for them to kind of realize and get used to it and be, like you said, forced into a situation like this where they can finally see some benefits from it. But if anything, this whole viral problem is going to be in the next 3-4 months. At least from me just scoping and talking to everybody, it seems like it's going to be, I mean, the academic year, he just keeps pushing. They keep saying April 12th and now it's May 1st. It's like, dude, just call it done. You're not going back.
Yeah, I know. Dude. And
stop teasing people.
I would joke with my wife too. I'm like, dude, they need to start paying you the teacher's salary, dude. Like you're the teacher now. She's getting like, all this curriculum stuff. Yeah.
Yes.
So she's killing it. She's been having to like, the kids are getting a little stir crazy. So she's been trying to do fun like activities and shit. Like, having them do yoga and jump on the trampoline and stuff. But it's like, dude, we're still stuck inside and like we're all each other sees all day,
Yeah.
So yeah, man, it's crazy.
It's too much family during this time for sure. Trying to find my self-isolation during isolation. Everyone's going on each other's nerve. I think everybody, at least the first week. Exactly. You're either going to come out, well, at least a marriage couple is either going to come out of this like with a kid or like divorced. I think that's the extreme case. It's either we grow really well together or it's going to be down each other's throats. But anyways, we had you on today to kind of go through some cool, awesome stuff that you've been kind of cooking. So anything that you want to start sharing, you can just throw that up on the screen. But what we're going to do in this session is kind of go through kind of your thoughts, experiences, and we'll shoot the shit while we're doing it. So
yeah, that sounds good, man. Let me, I'll just pull up the video first.
Okay.
So at work, oops, got that volume blasting. At work, we've, I've been trying to help the prop artists and the character artists have like lighting environments so that they can kind of, have consistency, right? For texturing and stuff, we've been trying to make it so, Substance Painter has the same HDRs as our Unreal Engine asset viewers. Mm-hmm. And the artists can like go back and forth, and we've been trying to bring those things in parity. So there's no surprises, whenever they bring in an engine. Right. So that got me thinking that, this could be a resource that a lot of people don't have, where like they can quickly swap between different lighting setups. Right. And then just showing off work. Like I have like a lot of buddies who like, they can model and texture really, really well. But when it comes to presentation of their assets, they struggle a little bit. And a lot of it's just a lack of understanding of like how Unreal's lighting works and all that kind of stuff. So I made this new pack. It's called the Pro Lighting Kit. And the idea is like, you just open up the level, you drag and drop the level into like your project directory, you open it up, and then you just dump in your assets, whether that's a character or a prop. And you could choose to bake lighting if you want to look really tasty, or if it's a character that you want to idle and stuff, then the lighting that's in there dynamically is like pretty good. So I'll just start this video. Let me screen share.
Yeah, I mean, that's a very important feature, especially within the studio. Light calibration between different software is something that isn't as widely known, which is very surprising. Like, there's nothing you can do within the Substance, but just to calibrate it just enough by eyeballing it. But like within Unreal or any engine, within even the static mesh editor, right? There's a lot of differentiation between the two. And then artists and props or world builders are yelling at each other, saying your shit sucks. But I mean, in reality, it's just because it's lacking the like lighting director such as yourself kind of going there and tuning and making sure everyone is setting it up correctly.
Another thing too is just the angle at which you're viewing your model from its light source drastically changes the way the material is perceived too. Mm-hmm. So if you have just a screenshot that someone throws in and they took a shitty screenshot, like the textures might actually be fine, but then they're going to get a bunch of direction, like, oh, you need to increase the gloss or whatever, or we need more breakup. But really they don't. And it's just that they were displaying it wrong. And then when you see it in game, it's like, oh, this is way too glossy now.
Right.
So I think having stuff where you can dynamically see objects move and see how the light rolls off of it and stuff is super important. Something we've been trying to do at the office too is, I'll just take screen sharing off right now. Something we've been trying to do at the office as well is have a lot more video stuff, or we'll just open up the prop in something like that asset viewer and we'll just like check it out live. And like we can like move about it and change the camera angle and stuff. So then you can really give good texture feedback. Mm-hmm. And then also if you're able to take good screenshots of your stuff, it gets the rest of the team excited. Programmers and designers and production people who aren't involved with the art every day, they might, it just helps morale, right? They were able to see the characters and stuff coming along. So, yeah,
that's definitely something that doesn't get done a lot, because within the studio, we're always kind of going for the green light projects or like demos and stuff. But in between those long stretches of hard development, the team doesn't really know what's going on in another department. So like screenshots, especially, that's not part of our thing. We just want to keep moving forward because it takes time to actually like showcase it and stuff, right? And that can be
the good thing is you get consistency, right? Like if everybody's working in the same lighting environments and they can shift between them and look at how stuff is holding up, you can see things relative to each other. That way you don't get stuff like albedos that are all over the place and stuff like that, because you're able to bring them in context in the same lighting environment together, which is super important, because then, people aren't doing funky stuff where they're changing the exposure of their scene or doing weird stuff. And then things come in too dark or too bright. Everything's consistent. So
definitely.
Yeah. I'm going to try to crack open the scene and just show like how easy it is to get going.
Definitely. While you're doing that, I'll ask a few questions. So lighting is surprisingly, well, not surprisingly in hot demand, but it is still surprisingly not a lot of studios are having a whole lighting department, right? Not a dedicated lighting department. They're still in like the beginning stages of setting that. It's not as common around in the industry. Right. All right. So what's the landscape of that looking like? Are you feeling like it's both supply and demand, where not a lot of people are discovering that lighting is a whole separate thing for people who want to get into this business, and studios not respecting lighting enough to kind of dedicate lighting to a dedicated person?
I think some of it's just legacy. I think if you look at the studios that are at the forefront for visuals, right? Like studios like Naughty Dog, Activision, they pour a lot of money and time into lighting and materials. They ramp up their lighting departments really, really, really big. I think Last of Us 2 has like 12 lighters or something like that on their team. That's crazy. Because they're doing cinematics and stuff as well. But yeah, like I think the studios that really, really care about the visual fidelity of their games, they've been investing in lighting because they see how powerful it is. Like if you look at Pixar movies, like Toy Story 1 versus Toy Story 4, like there's a huge jump, and most of it's from the lighting and rendering. Like some of it's from modeling, models can be a little bit beefier now, and, texturing has come a long way too. But the lighting materials has been really pushing visuals forward. And people are starting to see things more like a cinematographer would in film. So things aren't just like drag and drop a point light just so people can see in this corridor. It's like, how can we craft this frame to look super sick? And I think people have seen the value in that. I do think that not a lot of people know about it as a skill set. It's a full-time thing. You're starting to see a lot more lighting artists like on ArtStation. A lot of juniors are starting to do like relighting of scenes and stuff, which is super cool. So people are getting interested in it, but I don't think it's like as widely known. People, when they think about working in video games, they either think, oh, I'm going to be a programmer, or I'm going to do like concept art or characters or environments. They don't think about, some of the more niche skill sets like visual effects or lighting. But I think it is getting more popular. And I think people are looking at games like Last of Us 2 and stuff, and they're like, oh shit, like how are they making this game look so damn good? And a lot of it's coming from that.
What do you think is missing just to kind of make it more widely available and widely known in the next few years? Do you feel like it just takes, we're just in another game cycle, another game development cycle where Last of Us 2 or Last of Us 3, where we're finally caught up, where the environment department is just as heavy as the lighting department? I mean, like places like you already named, Activision, Naughty Dog, these companies are already ahead of the curve, but they're definitely the top 10%. 90% of the companies around the world right now are still trying to find these lighting artists, but finally acknowledging, I think we're in a stage, at least where I feel, they're finally acknowledging lighting is its own separate thing.
Yeah, I think, the cool thing about our industry is people share knowledge all the time. Like you have GDC and SIGGRAPH and stuff where people are doing these talks and they're seeing rendering programmers drop really sick lighting tech. And I think that's become very inspiring. And engines like Unreal and Unity, they come out of the box with really, really good lighting and rendering. where you can make your projects look really, really awesome, really fast. I think a lot of engines back in the day, especially for like PS2, PS3, and Xbox 360 and stuff, it was just very much just like environment artists or level designers to do the lighting. And it was just more like a visibility thing, or like quick color palette stuff. But now that you have things like subsurface scattering and like awesome contact shadows on characters' faces and stuff like that, you can really shape and craft things like you couldn't before. And now that we're getting like ray tracing and stuff, like we're starting to bridge that gap a lot closer to what feature film is like. So I think, I think this era lighting started being taken a lot more seriously than the last generation of consoles, but I think next generation is going to push that even further, and make it a lot more accessible to people, because of things like ray tracing and stuff. You can get better looks a lot faster with fewer lights,
So you worked at across a few industries, so I'm sure you have still a lot of contacts within, visual effects industry. So what are their impressions right now with lighting in games? Do you see a lot of people converting over? Enterprise industry is kind of literally working within Unreal right now. If anything, you're a pretty hot commodity in other industries because people are finally just starting with real-time tech.
Sure.
What's your view on that? Yeah.
They're definitely trying to marry the two industries, I think, eventually. Like even when I worked on Avengers Infinity War, and when I was at Digital Domain, we kind of like had sparse areas of different people who would sit next to us and stuff like that. So we had, every now and then we might have one or two people. It's like most of the team was Infinity War, but then we might have one or two people who are working on like a real-time Unreal Engine demo of like a character or something like that. So they had the DigiDoug. They actually did a TED Talk on them. The DigiDoug team was like right behind me, and seeing like what those guys are doing in Unreal was like, oh shit! Like they really are pushing and trying to have more control like when they're on set. So being able to see like what a mocapped character would look like in real time is super valuable. You're having things like The Mandalorian, where they have a digital set that they can dynamically light, by the way. So they can change the lighting on set because it's real time. And then that affects the way the characters are lit on the set. So you had the actor who's playing the bounty hunter or whatever. He, was being lit dynamically by huge projectors that had an Unreal Engine environment in it. So this stuff is starting to conjoin, which is super sick. And a lot of my buddies are like super interested in it. They're asking me like, hey, like, how did you get into games? Like, what are the steps I need to take? Because they're all interested and just fascinated by the idea that the stuff's so accessible. Like you can just go to Epic's website and download Unreal Engine for free. And you have like all of Megascan's library for free. So you can compose scenes and like learn pretty quickly, So
yeah, I would love to kind of talk more about the virtual production stuff. Like Mandalorian was a huge milestone. I mean, they started playing around with it on Lion King. It's just a Favreau guy. He's kind of like the pioneer right now. He's like doing everything for everybody. So what's great about the digital sets is that it's literally game development, and a lot of that has to do with lighting artists such as yourself within Unreal. And you're not only illuminating the environments behind the actors, and they're super glad about it because they're not like goofing around and playing improv in front of a green screen anymore. They actually have a set that actually am responding to, so they're super excited. And not only that, your lighting is basically lighting the actors in the set. And so if anything, lighting is a hot commodity in every industry, especially entertainment. Where do you see that? Where do you see that growing from here? Like, do you feel like every digital movie is basically going to be asking more and more guys like yourself to be on these sets to kind of help out?
I think green screen heavy movies for sure. Just for the fact that cinematographers can frame their subjects better, right? Like if Peter Jackson's doing another Hobbit movie, He's got the real actors, but he's got this, what it does have a real-time virtual production thing as well. So he's able to frame his shots and get a camera angle with the digital set behind. And without that, it's like you're just kind of shooting from the hip. He has no idea what he's doing. So I definitely think it's going to be more popular. They call it in-camera VFX. I think First Man did the same thing. They built a huge light rig, and that light rig is what lit Ryan Gosling while he's like in the spaceship and stuff. And that saves like a ton of compositing time later, because before you'd have to get the reflections on the visor, clean up anything that was on the visor that you didn't want. But now the director's seeing exactly what the shot's going to look like through the lens, like while it's happening. So it's a huge time saver in post. So I think it's good and bad. I think it's good that what you see is what you get a lot more as you're shooting, which is super cool. But I do think it might be bad in that things are getting faster and simpler. And we might need less people doing it, right? Where you might need, 50 compositors on a movie, maybe you need 20 or something like that. But there's way more content that needs, visual effects. So I think there's going to be work, and same with video games. There's everybody trying to make games now and get into the digital side of things. Like I even got hit up randomly from Wayfair. They're like a furniture company,
right?
And like they have like fully digital things, like all their most of their ArcViz stuff is all just digital.
Mm-hmm.
But let me share with you guys the virtual production of The Mandalorian. This is super cool.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, there's definitely going to be a hybrid step with the need of traditional compositors and now virtual production compositors. Do you feel like the traditional compositors, just to future-proof, should start to get into our tech, as it seems like this, as Unreal gets better and better, there's going to be, rendering will always be king, but at some point it's going to get to a high quality bar where with the waiting time and the render farms just don't make as much sense as before. I wonder what your general opinion about that is. There going to be a world where this is going to replace traditional compositing?
I think there's always going to be a place for traditional compositing for sure. These sets are massive, and the work that goes into making these, I don't know what the cost difference would be instead of just doing it all after the fact. I think there's pros and cons. Like you're limited to this space in the set a little bit, right? Like there's definitely limitations with this workflow. Where I think that you'll always need some form of digital compositing that's completely done in post. But I do think this is cool and exciting that it's another way of doing things. It's cool to see stuff getting pushed forward. Hopefully things will look a little bit more grounded and stuff as well. With in the terms of reflections and lens flares and stuff, I think there's a weird phase and so you can kind of see it happening here.
It is an interesting time. It feels like for a long time, game developers have been like the ugly stepbrother for visual effects companies for a while. And now we're not shoulder to shoulder just yet, but I do feel like there's a certain level of respect that's happening that it's becoming more mutual, which is really healthy, because now we're learning from each other. We're more open to learning from each other, and more accepting for people to kind of move back and forth. Whereas I would even say 5 years ago, that was ridiculous. It's like, get out of here with your PS3 graphics. It's I don't know.
Yeah. I think it's a little bit of both. I've heard that on the game side too. Might throw a resume somewhere to someone and they're like, oh, it's just, he's only worked at Disney and ILM. He's never worked in video games. It's yeah, but look at his art, it's super good. I'm sure he can figure it out.
Yeah.
But there's that kind of stigma as well that, they're going to come in and have million poly characters and stuff. They're not going to know what to do. But I think people can learn and people can adapt. Same with a game artist going into film. Like if they want to transition into film, I think a lot of the same theories are similar. It's just technical specifications are a little bit different, but that stuff can be learned. I think people get a little bit intimidated by that. And in some cases, people have been burned by putting trust in someone from a different industry and it not working out. But I don't think there should be like a straight up stigma where you're like, I'm not gonna, even take a chance on someone because of this. I think that's stupid.
Mm-hmm.
But I do agree. I think now that games are looking better, I think there's like a fascination with people in film, like, oh shit, how do they do that? Like, this looks so good, And that's because we're used to rendering shit. Like I had some shots that would take, 24 hours per frame on the render farm.
Yeah.
That's per frame, 24 frames per second. So, stuff took forever. So being able to see things run at 30 frames, 60 frames per second, and it looks like not as good, but close is like super exciting.
What do you think is, in years of difference, maybe in a couple of years, what needs to be done so that bar of it doesn't look as good, it's good enough, but like to a place where you feel like, this is better than sitting 24 hours for one frame, where the average consumer won't be able to tell. I feel like right now the average consumer can't tell. It's mostly visual effects people, just like masturbating to art, basically, right? But like
for sure, dude.
For you personally, where do you think what needs to be done within the pipeline? I mean, ray tracing is already on board. It's not there where it's widely adopted. It's not in games everywhere yet, but it's getting there. What else? What other tech needs to happen for us to be like, okay, it's here. We don't need to wait 24 hours anymore and wait for to reach the graphics that we need. It will be a difference to the trained eye, but we're here where we're okay with doing this real time.
I think when we get to the level of destruction you can do in like Houdini and stuff, I think that'll be a big one. If you can have that many polys and be able to bring in like caches of like such density of having like a skyscraper collapse or something like that, for example, and bring that into the engine like you would in a feature film where it's like millions and millions and millions of tries, and not having the game engine poop its pants. I think that will definitely, we'll be able to start doing more effects in real time. And then for lighting, ray tracing is pretty good in Unreal right now for shadows. So you can have ray trace shadows from a light, and that's pretty solid, but we're still not there with the global illumination. So the bounce light, that stuff is still pretty janky and it's very expensive. Like you're not going to run at frame rate for a game with their GI right now, unless you have a super beefy computer. And then same thing with reflections, translucency, all that stuff can't be ray traced like you would in a feature film yet. They do have like some forms of it, but for example, with the ray trace reflections, I think there's like a limit on how many times it can bounce a reflection. So if you had like, 6 chrome balls next to each other, they would only reflect each other's reflections so many times, then it would terminate to black. Where in like a pre-rendered thing, you can set that number super high and just wait for the render. So I think we're getting there. But there's just technical limitations still. Doing it, you have all these pros who work in Houdini and Maya and stuff, and they're doing pre-rendered things in Arnold and Redshift and stuff. And, these are some of the smartest people in the world making these renderers, and it still takes hours, So I think for the real-time side of it being good enough, I think we're already kind of seeing that with things like The Mandalorian, where it's good enough. Like it's fine. Like having practical characters in a digital set, I think it's pretty solid. Now having fully digital characters, I think maybe we're ways off from that. But maybe that will be, a thing in the future. Like even the guy I was talking about, the DigiDoug thing at Digital Domain, it's still really, really good, but there's still the uncanny valley. You can tell it's a digital dude, even with pre-rendered stuff, that's like one of the hardest things to do is a digital human to make look convincing. But I think it's getting there, dude. Maybe PS5, dude. We'll see.
Yeah. Well, speaking about the next gen systems, I don't know if you spec'd it out. Is there anything there that you feel like we haven't really seen like a premier title from any of those two? And with the next systems, you can pretty much, people have rigs that are more powerful than these systems already. But what helps with these consoles, it kind of brings more development teams to kind of push to the limit, which high-end PC users aren't used to, right? You need these consoles to kind of bring in that type of firepower and talent behind it. Do you feel the next system is gonna really push the bar? I mean, what type of tech upgrade do you feel besides maybe ray tracing getting better and more optimal for GI, especially on the Unreal side? They're still wrapping their heads around that. I feel Unity is actually probably doing a better job at figuring out that type of tech. They have a really talented team, but a lot of these games were still using light maps, and it's like it's like 2008, man. Light maps is like most like AAA companies don't even use light maps outside of Unreal anymore. So what were your thoughts about that?
Well, there usually is some kind of baking process that happens for most games, whether that's baking spherical harmonic probes that are, they might have like a diffuse term and like a specular term where they're like providing that lighting information at a given space, and those just interpolate between things. Or you'll have like the traditional light maps like you do in Unreal Engine, or a combo of the two. Like in Unreal Engine, you have volumetric light maps, and those are kind of like spherical harmonic probes. What those do is like give movable objects like the indirect lighting information so that they look like they're receiving some kind of bounce light or shadowing and stuff. So I think maybe with the new systems, if we do go more ray traced, we don't have to do as many cheats and bake as much, which would make things a lot more dynamic. Like I could see games becoming a lot more dynamic. There's a lot of when you have to deal with baked things, you run into issues where it's like, what's a physics object and what's not? Like, why can I blow up that barrel, but I can't knock over that Coke can that's on the table? It's like, oh, because that's baked. Like we want that to stay static because it's cheaper and the lighting looks better. So you run into those kind of issues where I think physics is really bound right now, and I think physics stuff is going to get way better with the new platforms. Lighting for sure is going to get a lot better, and I think level streaming and the way that the engine's able to handle like huge open spaces and stuff is probably going to get a lot better too.
Yeah, definitely with all those SSD. I mean, that's the biggest thing they've been kind of pimping. It's just their load abilities. So I think one of the other questions I have is that when it comes to development teams, kind of beefing up their lighting departments, educating the masses about how important lighting is. I mean, it's becoming more and more obvious. These AAA companies at the top 10% are kind of leading the way. And so it takes a while for other studios to kind of emulate not just the look, but like their development structure to make sense out of it, to like, hey, man, if Naughty Dog and these guys at Epic and everybody is doing this, that's the bar that we have to do. And this is how they set it up. They have an actual lighting department. So it takes a couple of years to kind of make that work, because most of these studios are in like 3-4 year or 5 year game cycles. And so we're starting to see some of those guys coming out of those game cycles and really investing in research and technology that is more widely adopted, right? Another thing that you kind of mentioned, the virtual production stuff, you're seeing that there's a hybrid approach because it could be very costly or cheaper, or these big budget movies need that fidelity, right? Because they have millions of dollars behind it. They want the best of the best. So they're going to still go with the traditional compositing, which is totally understandable. And physics plays a big part of that, just being able to simulate effects and light it properly. Do you see more of shows like Mandalorian, kind of more like at least above primetime television shows to utilize this first and widely adopt it around the industry more because it's maybe a cheaper option than going full on compositing after the fact? And maybe that's how
I
it's going to
definitely
grow.
think so, especially for episodics, because when you build out your set, you're able to reuse it, right? So if you're able to build out a set, you have your lighting setup for that set. It's very easy to go back in there for a future episode and bang out your shots. So I definitely think it's super valuable. And the fact that you can just update the lighting on the fly is really, really cool. Like if the director of photography wants you to darken a torch that's behind a character because it's stealing too much of the scene or whatever, you can just have them do that like on set, which is super cool. Mm-hmm. So I definitely think that's going to become more mainstream. I don't know what movie kind of made that, first jump. It might have been Gravity. Like I know they had like a huge light box thing they created where Sandra Bullock and George Clooney were in there, and like when they're spinning, the lights were spinning around and shit, and she's being lit by that, and their visors get lit by that and everything. I definitely think it's going to become more mainstream though, for sure. Mm-hmm. And then as far as people beefing up their lighting departments, I think as the scope of projects get bigger and there's more environments and more things, more places the characters go, I think it's just a necessity. It's a time thing. There's not going to be enough time for like one or two people to do it. You need to ramp up the team size.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You were kind of mentioning that before, like, and I never seen this in game development where when things do get easier, the department gets smaller. If anything, they get more ambitious and they want more.
That's true. That's true. Yeah.
So it's a good and bad thing because it feels like now everyone can go out there and make like Fortnite in real time, right? Because can't you just plop another tree? It's like, well, I can't just add another level just because we have mega scans now. Right. I mean, it just still takes time to make it look good. So that's one of the things, at least I've seen the last couple of years, where big and small, right? Small companies emulating bigger companies, wanting the same amount but lesser people. But because of the technology getting better, they think it's slightly more achievable, but not really, right? So the team gets stretches thin, and then the big companies. The Call of Duties, instead of one game, it's 3 games every time they ship a game now. And those 3 games in its own, it's like mega huge. Now it's like Warzone, and it's not just like small levels. So, and I don't think the development team has gotten that much bigger, to be honest. If we were to kind of measure the percentage increase, each department.
No, I don't think they have. Yeah. No, but what I've heard from other people is just outsourcing's fucking gotten wild, dude. Like
insane. Yeah.
I've heard numbers up to like 80%, where it's like 20% of our shit's done in-house, 80% is outsourced type thing.
Right.
So yeah, I think they're just they're seeing more of the value in like the ideas being generated, the visual bar being generated, and just overall the vision being generated in-house. And then it's like, all right, well, we don't need our dudes making trash cans and chairs and stuff. We can send that out. And I think, I get that, but I don't think more is always better. And I think because a lot of times games look at what other people are doing, they just think that they need that stuff. Like the players have some expectation of like what they want from a game because of what other games are doing. But it's like, oh, we need crafting and we need this. It's like, do we though? Like, what does the game actually need to be fun? So I think it's good for us to look at what each other are doing and learn from each other and stuff. But I don't think we necessarily need to emulate what each other's doing, because then you get a bunch of games that feel the fucking same and look the same, which we kind of do. It's like Uncharted is pretty much Tomb Raider. They call it Dude Raider because it's just like it's the same game, dude. It's like with a different character, like
what's even funnier that the new Tomb Raiders emulate Uncharted, which
I know exactly.
So they're copying themselves in a way. It's a funny industry because we're seeing these shifts and changes, and Thankfully, in recent years, right? I feel like the mid-tier studios are slowly creeping back up, but for a while it was scary.
Mm-hmm.
Like a lot of the studios were disappearing. It was either your indie or your AAA, which if any middle class that's gone, it can be a very scary type of industry, right?
Well, I think small teams like or mid-sized teams can do a lot, right? Like you look at what Insomniac did with Spider-Man, like they fucking killed it, and their team's not that big.
Yep.
They just had really, really solid like tech departments that automated what they needed, and they were thinking more about the big picture. Like if you break down any one of their assets, they're not the best looking assets in games, but big picture wise, the whole scene looks sick, and you feel like Spider-Man, and it feels visceral and good, and it's solid. And they did that with a small team. Yeah. And I don't think they were trying to do too much of what other games are doing. I think they kind of like are their own standalone thing. And that's why people liked it so much. It felt fresh, and you had that fantasy of being Spider-Man. So I would say, stuff like that. It'd be sick if more studios were being like that. They just got scooped up by Sony though, right? So they were indie, but yeah.
Well, they've been around for a long time. They went through many franchises, had its ups and downs, but it was Spider-Man that finally got them to sell to Sony. I mean, they've been always basically making games for Sony. It took them this long to finally, where Sony's like, yo, Spider-Man 2, let's snatch them. They can do it.
Let's do it. Yeah.
At a deal, though. Yeah, Teddy's happy, right? But I kind of want to ask you about this question. So a few episodes ago, we actually had a lawyer on. I don't know how familiar you are with the AB5. It's a bill that like kind of restricts contractors within California, and it's still help. Well, it was kind of bred through helping Lyft and Uber drivers, but it's affecting all the other industries because there are other industries besides Uber drivers, right? And and you've been across an industry that exclusively almost hires contractors on a project base deadline, right? How are you seeing?
Visual effects is like 80% contractors.
Exactly, and a lot of these visual effects have been moving to Canada or other states or whatever, but there's a still good portion of them here. How are you seeing that being affected? And do you have any networking stories that you feel like your friends are kind of going through that right now with this crazy thing that's just kick-started pretty much since November? Same time as the virus, coincidentally.
well, the way that they've gotten around it, and I think that game studios are going to get around it as well, is just having companies that are contracting companies, and you work for that company. B2B. So you get hired by that company, and then you're a contractor through them for whatever the project is. It's like even when I was at DD and stuff, like I didn't just come in as a DD contractor. I was working for I forget what the company was called, but I was contracting through them. So I think that's how they get around that kind of stuff.
So there has been at least a good... So it hasn't really stopped any of your friends. It's just a little hiccup then. So things have been pretty swell since then.
Yeah, I don't think any of that's changed too much. We're in games. Like you could have a dude who's just like his own freelance concept artist or something. And he just used to work from home as a sole proprietor of his own thing. And then I'm pretty sure that can't happen anymore, right? Like that's the whole thing. It's like he's got to be hired by a third-party contract company that the studio uses as like a outsourced resource or something.
Right. So at least forming an LLC, which I think you should be doing anyways. I mean, if you're going over as lone man Scott, you're kind of you're opening yourself up to a lot of issues potentially.
Dude, that way I can hire my kids to work for me, dude. And I don't have to pay them and stuff, dude.
Child labor is the best.
Yeah. Have my son watch my renders. Dude.
Yeah. I mean, they're not going to school anyways. Might as well start paying rent. No, I feel about the same. But it's one of those things that I've been curious about since you're so connected within that industry. Well, I mean, what is your overall there's always going to be a fine line between the game industry and the visual effects industry. I don't think we're ever go to the extreme. We're going to try to get as close as possible, just how employers think. It's like, hey, let's shrink our core team as much as possible, outsource as much as possible. But because we're so dependable on the creativity to kind of see a project through, we can't compartmentalize. That's my theory. I mean, I would love to kind of hear what your thoughts are. Are we going to ever be in danger of being in Canada, basically?
I think some studios might. Depends on who's at the top. Like, I work at a studio where luckily they for real do care about everybody's opinion. Like, to a really crazy degree, where like everybody play tests. Like, we even have reception play test with us and stuff, like everybody's part of the team. Like, I heard this crazy horror story from Treyarch, where they like wouldn't let their QA talk to other developers and stuff. Like, if they just saw them like out and about in the hallways, they like weren't to talk to them and like weren't invited to company parties, didn't get any company benefits. Weird shit like that. So like when our owners heard about that, they changed it so we couldn't use third-party contractors for QA anymore. We hired them full-time. So all of our QA guys work full-time. They get benefits and everything. They're like their full-time staff. And I think because we develop games that way, where everybody's part of the team and everybody's contributing feedback and everybody play tests together, I think they see the value in the people, and they want to hire the best people who are going to help push whatever our product is. It's like our hiring process is kind of gnarly. Like, we interview all day. Like, people who interview with us, and they interview different departments, because different departments might have to work with those people in the future. So I think if you have studios that really care about their employees, like for real care about them, and see them as something that's going to make their product better, I don't think they're going to compartmentalize as much and like devalue certain departments because it can just be outsourced. I think they see the value in the people they bring on. Otherwise, they don't want to bring them on. So, or they don't last very long. Mm-hmm. So I don't know. I think it just depends. I could see some rich, disconnected owner of a studio who doesn't know much about like what it takes to develop a game, thinking that just like on paper, it's way cheaper if we do this. Why don't we just do this? Or again, looking at what other companies are doing. Well, they outsourced 80% of their shit. Why are we spending in-house money on this? So I think people who are a bit disconnected from the process and what goes into it, they'll probably push that way. So I think there is some danger. Yeah. I think it just depends on where you work.
Yeah, definitely. Well, I mean, we're at the hour mark, and I think this is a perfect opportunity to kind of throw back to your trailer for your light rig, so that people can check it out.
Sure.
Yeah, Scott is definitely one of the best lighting artists I know and have worked with, and I definitely want to push this stuff as much as possible. And if you are a shitty lighter, you can definitely benefit from it, as many of you are.
Yeah, and if you guys do download it, like let me know if you run into any issues or if anything isn't as you expect or whatever. You can make that version 3 or 4 or whatever it is, dude.
Definitely. As always, stay safe out there, guys. Try not to kill your family member before the COVID stuff. I know it's super stressful. For me, I've been working from home for a while now, but like I still go out as much as possible. But this is like even pushing me to the limit. So I can empathize with people who are just suddenly thrown into this. Like, this is the most hardcore work from home situation. If you never even worked from home before. So I'm hearing a lot of stories.
Like, you're not even supposed to go on walks and stuff, right? Like,
yeah. Well, it's even bad now, because now I'm seeing people. I was telling my friend earlier, I'm seeing people I didn't know even lived on my block, and I'm just like, are these like potential looters that are just scoping out my neighborhood, but I guess they lived for years around there, and it's like the types of people who never exercised before too. So it's kind of funny to kind of like, all right, you're trying to build your immune system. It's too late for that, bro. But I still applaud, right? It's still good, but we're at a point where they're still stuck in their house, and I'm doing that crazy like as soon as I see someone approach, I do that walk around them just to keep that 6 feet of distance. But that because they're so deprived, all right, most of these are old folks, they want to talk to you. It's like, yo, do you know what kind of situation? Do you know what kind of situation we are right now? I know. It's like, I can kill you right now. You're at risk. So.
I can kill you. I saw this dude in New York. He had like a 6 foot like diameter circle, like a hula hoop type thing around his body that would like bump into people if they got too close. Because he was.
Wear a big sumo suit and just bump people around. That'd be hilarious. But
I got super lucky, dude. My wife has made the quarantine mad fun. Like, it's been actually really good for us. But I've heard stories where people like found out their spouse cheated on them like 2 weeks before quarantine, and then they're stuck like living with them in quarantine, like shit like that.
Damn.
It's super rough. Some people got way more rough, dude. Like we just kind of chill and watch movies and stuff, so it's fine. But
it's a great connecting time. Like I'm at a point too. I don't want to order out anymore because how we're basically hearing Whole Foods employees are getting it now. We're hearing Amazon deliver. It's like, dude, do you think these guys flipping burgers, washing their hands, bro? Right. I know it's not supposed to be on food as much, but like the stuff that comes with the packaging of the food, you're eventually gonna get it. Like how clean. Right. I watched. This is going off topic, but it's funny. Everyone's at home right now, right? My wife made me watch this viral video about this guy. He's like, this is how you bring in groceries and clean it, and it's like 30 minutes to clean an apple from the bag. It's like, no one's going to do this. No one's watching this. This guy's dragging an extra 5 minutes just to get views, man, at this point. He's taking advantage of this. But I watched the whole thing. I was like, I'm not doing this. I'd rather get it. And there's no way. we're breaking point. But let's throw that up so people can check it out. And let's throw I'm gonna give the link as always if you're watching this live, but in the video as you're watching the recording, the links are going to be up there. But let's tell the good people how they can find this. Appreciate it, man. Do you want me to throw it up on my screen? Throw it up on your screen. Sick, dude. All right, so go to my ArtStation. I'm selling it on the marketplace there. Okay. So easy way is just Scott Knapp if you forget the link on ArtStation, but also if you just type Scott Knapp into ArtStation, KNAPP. Right now, if you go to the marketplace, it's under trending, which is super cool. Appreciate the support, everyone. But it's this right here. So let me throw up the video. The cool thing is I got this magenta light in here, some purple action that makes it stand out on the page. So it's got this huge obnoxious all caps font. So, it all helps. Yeah, dude. Let's throw some music on here, dude. Let's throw a little music on. Only I can hear the music though. Let me see. Oh, bummer. I hear it. Listen to the music, dude. Enjoy it. You should just throw in some COVID vaccine over it too. That probably get some hits. But yeah, so how long did it take for you to kind of put this all together? I mean, was it something that you've always been thinking that there's been a need and you just been slowly building to it? No, like I showed a couple of my environment guys, Phil Stoltz, Dan McGowan, Chris Evans, like a couple of my buddies, Ian Runnels, and they wanted to show off their stuff. And then when I showed them how the asset viewer works and how easy it is to kind of like switch between stuff, they're like, dude, you should make this. So it's really because of them. Like I didn't really think about doing it before. But like, dude, this would be killer for prop artists and character artists to use. So it took me like, I don't know, like 3 or 4 days to make it. And then it took like 1 or 2 weeks for the presentation. Like I spent a lot of time recording different things and editing and all that kind of stuff. So sweet.
Yeah, man.
Well, it looks great, man. It is definitely, with everybody at home now, they're either catching up on work or doing portfolio work. So more and more people kind of needing this type of thing exactly to kind of streamline their process. So I encourage everybody to go to ArtStation, type in Scott Knapp. Scott is spelled normally, Knapp isn't. So it's Knapp. He's been spelling it wrong his whole life, a whole generation. Go on ArtStation.
My grandparents are so dumb, dude.
They've been sleeping on the wrong letters. So go on to ArtStation, check it out. It's trending. It's popular. It's awesome. You guys, it's a great price too, right? It's like $5. What is it?
It's $5, and it comes with a tutorial as well on like how to get started, and then also show how you can take one of those lighting scenarios and make your own. So like if you didn't like the HDR, or you had like your own that you wanted to use, in the tutorial I show you how to set your own up. So you can make your own lighting setup for yourself, but use the same methodology, you know?
Well, there you go, man. So instead of like spending that $5 on another COVID burger, just spend it on Scott Knapp and get your portfolio looking better.
Appreciate it.
All right, guys. That ends this week. I'll see you guys next week. As always, thank you for joining us.